Hey everybody, this is a video about the sunbeams or the sun rays that come through the clouds called crepuscular rays. And what I'm going to do here is prove in this video with a series of proofs beyond a shadow of a doubt that the sun is close and the sun is small. First I'm going to show you an experiment I did with the sun rays that's very solid proof that the sun is in fact close and not very big. And then I'm going to refute Wikipedia's account of these crepuscular rays. They say that these rays are due to perspective and that in fact they are, for all intents and purposes, parallel lines from a sun that's almost 1,000,000 miles in diameter. But the fact that we see them splaying out, they say that that's due to perspective. I'm going to show that that's impossible. And then number 3, I'm going to show that it's actually when you take a look at this picture of the crepuscular rays, that actually perspective is missing from this photo, if in fact the sun were 1,000,000 miles in diameter and 93 million miles away. The heliocentric model is in trouble. So let's get to my experiment. I watched a video from my perspective. His video is called Flat Earth Sunbeams, Part 1. I was outside and I go, man, let me try that. And I just kind of ran in, I grabbed some cardboard, I cut some holes in it, and I wanted to see how the sun reacts coming through. So here I am, raising it high over my head, so I'm about 8 feet away from this, and the light doesn't diverge or spread out. You know, it doesn't splay out like we see the crepuscular rays. And this sun's far away. Just like in the heliocentric model, the sun is far away, right? 93 million miles away from our clouds. But we see the sun rays splaying out from the clouds as though it were a close sun and not a faraway sun. Well, you can see when it is far away, the light beams are parallel and they don't splay out or diverge from the clouds. So then I got a little bit more sophisticated. I went inside and I cut some nicer holes in another cardboard. You know, my budget went up. And here they are, and I put some CGI here. I put some beams in there, and you can see they are dead straight. No splaying out. And then you can also, there's a part here where I have it up overhead and I had the same results, no splaying out. So this is the example of the far away sun, that the rays, this is what we should experience coming through the clouds. The rays from a sun that's almost 1,000,000 miles in diameter and 93 million miles away, when those rays get here, they should be parallel and dead straight. But we don't see them as dead straight. We see them splaying out or diverging from the clouds. Something's not right here. Okay, here I am inside. Notice I got my light close. Look at already you can see the light splaying out. You see that? I drew you can see the circles on the floor and on my piece of cardboard actually. Those are the original size of the holes that when I was outside they lined up perfectly. Here you can see them completely splaying out. And if I put the rays on it like this, the sun rays, and that's not even as splayed out as they got, it's just that the cloud is in view. And I want you to be able to see the cloud, which is my cardboard with the holes cut out of it. That way I could line up the rays. But as you can see, when I moved up a little bit off the floor and put the light even closer, the rays really splayed out. So I just wanted you to see that. Okay, so there you go. There's hard evidence that when the light source is close to the clouds, the light will diverge. The dispersion pattern you can see when I was outside, the dispersion pattern remained the same, meaning the 5 holes that I had, that stayed exactly the same, and that's a faraway light source. But when the light source was close, they splay out. That definitely supports the flat Earth model of a small, close sun. Okay, let's analyze this claim that science makes and Wikipedia makes that the crepuscular rays are due to perspective, that they're actually very close to parallel lines. For all intents and purposes, they are parallel coming from a sun that's almost 1,000,000 miles in diameter, but we don't see them parallel coming through the clouds. Those crepuscular rays are angled outward. They splay out. They're diverging from the clouds. And Wikipedia is saying that that's due to perspective. Okay, and Wikipedia also uses railroad tracks like these. And they say, see how these converge at your horizon, or they diverge from the perspective of the sun outward? And they're saying that that's what's going on here. Okay, so we need a quick little review of perspective. Notice in this long hallway, all parallel lines and planes angle to the eye level or the eye position of the observer. Notice that the side walls angle in, those are parallel lines to one another, and the ceiling and the floor are also parallel, but notice how they angle toward each other and they come to your eye level. All right, you have an X, Y, and Z axis. So the railroad tracks would fit your Z axis. That's going away from you, and those lines, yes, they converge. But the sun, and especially when the sun's overhead, would be bombarding us with huge vertical parallel lines, or rays, parallel rays. Yet, we don't see any of that, ever. So what I'm going to show you here is that this claim that these crepuscular rays is due to perspective is not true. It's impossible, because perspective will not converge or diverge or splay out lines or planes that are parallel to one another, that are perpendicular to the viewer or his z-axis. Okay, so like in this picture of the railroad tracks here, the lines going away from you, that's I did with the green line, that's the railroad track, that's obvious. And right from the get-go, they start to converge. Now those are parallel lines, but yet we never see them as parallel. They're always converging as they go away from you. Now the black poles that I have going down the side of the railroad tracks are also parallel lines to one another. But notice that they stay parallel. They don't lose their parallel orientation. They may get shorter and they get smaller, that's true. They do have a sort of a convergence, but they don't change their parallel orientation, these vertical lines, because they're perpendicular to you. Now, this is why invoking perspective to explain the crepuscular rays doesn't work, because perspective does not splay out these vertical lines, yet whenever the sun is overhead, we should see vertical parallel rays everywhere, and yet we don't see them. So perspective as an explanation for this is invalid. You know, what we see is the rays emanating from this omnidirectional sun. The rays fit the size of the sun, and the angles of the rays off the sun also fit the size of the sun and the shape of the sun. But they shouldn't fit the size of the sun if the sun is in fact almost 1 million miles in diameter and 93 million miles away. The rays should be huge and the sun small. So that's telling us that the sun is in fact close. Okay, and let's go back to what Wikipedia said. Wikipedia says that the rays from the sun are in fact parallel lines, but we don't see them that way because of perspective. Perspective splays them out. Okay, look at this picture. I put these rays in. Okay, so this is what's really going on, Wikipedia says. They say the rays are really parallel, and they would be from a 1 million mile diameter sun. But this is what our eyes do through perspective. It splays it out. Okay, here's another one. They say this is how they really are. They're vertical and they're parallel, but our eyes splay them out like this. Okay, so then why doesn't perspective take these telephone poles and splay them out like this? We don't see that, do we? Why doesn't it take these buildings and splay them out like this? They're vertical and they're parallel. Well, because what we see, the crepuscular rays, is not due to perspective. It's just due to the nature of an omnidirectional light source with the light coming out in all directions. And it's coming from a small sun. It's impossible that this sun is 1 million miles in diameter, as I've already showed you. So then if it's not perspective, these crepuscular rays are not due to perspective, as Wikipedia and science in general claims they are, then what are they? Well, it's very simple. All they are is radially propagated light, or another way of saying it, light rays emanating out from a common center.